Let's move on to the second panel of the day. They'll be considering the question, how do we make the institution more human and capable of caring for the ever-changing spaces of Asian American artistic practices? Michele Carlson leads this panel. Michele is a practicing artist, writer, educator, and curator whose transdisciplinary research investigates the intersections of history, loss, power, and visual culture. Michele was born in Seoul, Korea, but grew up in Seattle, Washington. Michele hosts the imprint, Related Tactics, which entertains diverse projects that aim to support artists of color, particularly within the field of art writing and criticism. She currently lives and works in the Washington, D.C. area and is Associate Professor of Printmaking at the Corcoran School of Arts and Design at George Washington University. Please join me in welcoming Michele.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Sorry, professor vibes. Thank you all for being here. I hope everyone had a great lunch. And thanks, Jeff, for such a great panel. It's really exciting, I think, as the institution panel, to follow such an exciting conversation amongst artists. The three of us are here today to kind of talk about the intersections of the institution with Asian American art, artists, and art legacies. And, we're kind of in this moment where the systems and the institutions that have been ordering our bodies, directing our voices, writing our histories are really being questioned. The agents of power are being questioned and challenged in both necessary ways, but I think also in ways that are deeply troubling. And I'm thinking a lot about the attacks on higher education and affirmative action, critical race theory, and DEIA initiatives. So I'm really appreciative that LAP called for a panel that might start to kind of unpack how institutions fit into this current, very complex moment, especially when kind of thinking about and following all the amazing artists discussion from the first panel. And just before we dive in, I want to quickly thank Montalvo and the LAP folks, Judy, Kelly, Emily, the ICA for organizing this robust and thoughtful day. I've been kind of showing up on the doorsteps of LAP since 2016, really with a hey, let me in kind of vibe. And they always let me in, and I'm really appreciative of that. And I always feel like they let me in, let me sit around the Montalvo table, be a part of this artistic community. So thanks for opening the door for us today, for all of us to kind of have these conversations. I'm gonna introduce my fellow panelists, and we are each going to kind of give a brief overview of the work we do. We're kind of a small panel, so we thought we would all just kind of be in conversation together and offer some insight into how our work intersects with the institution, this kind of complex space of the institution. Then we'll have a discussion and have some time for Q&A. Awesome. Okay, so we'll get started. I want to just first welcome and introduce Dr. Christina Ayson-Plank. We're having, there we go. Dr. Ayson-Plank is the Asian Pacific American Collections Specialist at the Archives of American Art, the Smithsonian Institution, and is based in Washington, D.C. From 2020 to 2024, Christina served as the Digital Archive Co-Director and Lead Curator for the University of California, Santa Cruz's interdivisional community-driven research initiative, Watsonville is in the Heart. She earned her PhD in Visual Studies from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Christina holds an MA in Asian American Studies from the University of California, I almost said Las Vegas. That's a whole different degree. UCLA. And a BA in art history and studio art from Marist College. Christina.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michele, and thank you all. I hope you all had a wonderful lunch and are well fed. Thank you, Michelle, for inviting me to this panel. Thank you, Judy, for organizing this amazing symposium. I'm also so grateful to be in conversation with Aleesa and everybody else on the panelists today. So yeah, I wanted to spend this time to kind of introduce not only myself, but the Archives of American Art and its history to ground our conversation on how to make institutions more human. So I want to start, with this letter right here. All of the material that I'll show is our papers in the archives holdings. But the Archives of American Art is a unit within the Smithsonian, and we were founded in 1954 at the Detroit Institute of Art. There are two gentlemen that worked there, Edgar Preston Richardson and Lawrence Arthur Fleischman, who realized in the 1950s that there was a need to catalyze an American art history, right? If we think about the time period, this is after World War II, where the United States is establishing itself as a world power. And they endeavored to create a repository that told that story that was different from and against European art history. So they founded the Archives of American Art at the DIA, and they realized very quickly that this was going to be a tough job, that there are many artists across the nation who had needs, that their staffing was not quite, did not have the expertise, that there were storage issues. Many of these issues remain the same today, which is very interesting. And this letter that you see on your screen kind of is a conversation between the two of them that details these woes. So in 1970, after doing this, for less than 2 decades, they realized they needed a shift and to move to an institution that could support all of this work. So they had a conversation with the Smithsonian, and they asked them if they were interested in taking on this labor. And in 1970, the Archives of American Art successfully became one of the units at the Smithsonian. Today, the Smithsonian's Archives of American Art holds over 30 million objects across 6,000 collections. So where do Asian American artists fit within this collection? Let's see, I'm having clicker issues. Okay. In 2022, my colleagues at the Archives of American Art decided to conduct a survey of the collections at the moment. And they were really earnest and interested in finding out how has the archives supported Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander artists. And the statistics that were generated were very sobering. Across the 6,000 collections, only 32 collections were related to Asian American artists. That is less than 1% of the collection, right? And I have speculations as to why this is the case, one of which is that the collecting related to Asian American artists has mainly been derived from 3 main special projects. The first one was in 1960 when the archives decided to conduct an oral history project related to the New Deal Arts Program. The second project was in 1989 when our then West Coast Regional Director, Paul Karlstrom, decided to participate in the Northwest Asian American Artist Project. And that research findings actually became a part of and was the basis for Gordon Chang and Mark Dean Johnson's exhibition at the De Young. And then the third project was in 2000 when the archives participated in a craft project, the Nanette L. Laitman Documentation Project for Craft and Decorative Arts in America. So these were the 3 main, major pushes for collecting at the archives related to Asian Americans and Native Hawaiians. So it's interesting to think about, right, Asian Americans as a, quote, special project, and we could probably get into that later on. So after doing the survey in 2020, they realized, the archives, that they needed to fill and to reckon with this gap, which is how I came along. So in January 2024, I started at the archives, and my main goal and my main premise for this position is to build the collections related to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander artists. I wanted to show you all some collections that we have that were from these special projects. So this is a letter between Mine Kubo and Kei Sekemachi, who is, of course, a Bay Area hero. One of the special things about archives is that they really detail the relationships and networks between artists. And so if you look at the Kei Sekemachi Stocksdale papers, you see hundreds of letters between them across many, many decades. And this is just one example of their conversations. The archives is also a special place because it allows us to explore untold stories within American art history and Asian American art history. So this is a photo of Reuben Tam on Monhegan Island, and I think it's really special because it charts his, transnational relationship between Kauai, where he was born and raised, and his home on Monhegan. And then the last thing that I wanted to end on is this photo of me and my teammates Josh T. Franco and Ricky Gomez with J.R. Henneman, who is the curator at the Denver Art Museum. We last week went to see the Toshiko Takeizu, the Tokyo Uyama exhibition that J.R. had curated, where many of the objects featured are from the archives. So for us, this is also about building and expanding the American art canon. So there's lots of work to be done. Less than 1% is a really sobering statistic. So I am both excited, but also understand the urgency to collect. And I really look forward to talking about that some more. So thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Christina. Next we have Aleesa Pitchamarn Alexander, who is the Robert M. and Ruth L. Halprin Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art and the co-director of the Asian American Art Initiative at the Cantor Arts Center at Stanford University. Aleesa started at the Cantor in the fall of 2018, where she has curated the exhibitions such as The Faces of Ruth Asawa, East of the Pacific, Making Histories of Asian American Art, and The Medium is the Message, Art Since 1950. Working with Assistant Professor of Art History Marcy Kwan, Aleesa is co-director of the Asian American Art Initiative, which aims to transform the Cantor into the preeminent institution for the collection, display, and study of Asian American and Asian diasporic art in the United States. She received her PhD in art history from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2018. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Judy, and everyone at Montalvo, and James and Zoe for having us here today. It's so nice to be in community with everybody, and I think some of you know or are aware of the work that I do at the Cantor, but I always welcome the opportunity to talk about it more in depth and share with you all some of our goals and aims and challenges and the like. So. In thinking about place and in thinking about the exhibition, I thought I would just open and talk about what the Asian American Art Initiative, or as we refer to it, the AAAI, means in the context of Stanford. Of course, this is something that Marcy and I think about all the time. The fact that Stanford is really a historically Asian American campus. It was Chinese laborers, migrant laborers who helped build the Stanford campus, who planted every palm tree down our iconic Palm Drive, who helped build the Stanford's residence, and of course, were essential in constructing the Transcontinental Railroad, which was how Leland Stanford amassed his wealth, right? So not only did they do that work, they did the more backbreaking part of the labor. At least 1,200 laborers lost their lives in the process, and evidence of their contributions is all over the campus. So Marcy and I think about it as a kind of debt, as a kind of historical ground that we quite literally walk on. And the history of Asian American presence in the Bay Area is long and deep. And so in thinking about why would you do an initiative like this at Stanford, well, it makes a lot of sense to us, not only in the context of the Stanfords, but also in the context of the long history of the Asian diaspora here in the Bay. So more specifically, we get this question all the time. Oops, the word initiative somehow got deleted. So I can't tell you exactly what all of Asian American art is about, but I can tell you specifically what the initiative is about. We get this question a lot. It's really just Marcy and I doing this work, and I have a curatorial assistant who works directly with me on this, and we have a division of labor. But in general, what it is it's an indefinite cross-campus project that is dedicated to the study of artists and makers of Asian descent. And we really believe in doing it at a university art museum. It's primarily based at the Cantor. Because of our connection to the libraries, to archives, which is essential to the work that we do in Marcy's teaching and her mentoring of graduate students, and then my capacity as a curator in running the curatorial program of the AAAI. So in my role, I work on all the acquisitions and the collection building at the Cantor, similarly to what you were describing, Christina. When I started at the Cantor in 2018, we had, I think, like 33 objects out of 41,000 that were made by Asian American artists. That math is also bad. And it's, I've done what I can in the time being. We have more than 500 now, but you can see how long it will take to just even quite, make a dent in acknowledging that inequity in the collection. And I do the sort of exhibition planning in terms of what types of exhibitions we choose to mount related to the initiative. Technically my purview is our modern and contemporary collection as a whole, but it is also my choice to devote basically all of my projects to the initiative. So within the scope of what I do, I choose to basically only do shows about Asian American art and artists. This is not to say it will always be that way, but right now, at this kind of nascent stage of the initiative, I think that it's really important to lay that foundation. And maybe some of you were able to come to the Cantor in fall 2022 when we had our physical launch, where we, Marcy and I have been doing this work since 2018, since I came. It is the reason I came to Stanford, because I knew that this was an opportunity. And then we spent some years kind of just, doing R&D. And then in 2022, we came out with a suite of exhibitions and a major convening that some folks here were a part of. Where we had 3 shows that were mounted related to the initiative that were all kind of historical in nature. And I'll talk about them a little bit more. One of the things that I really like about what we do is our capacity to partner with special collections, Stanford libraries. We acquire archives too. We think of ourselves like, well, if we can't take it, where we send people are always the archives of American art, right? So I'm in conversation with colleagues like Christina and then also curators at the Smithsonian American Art Museum we are in conversation about this work that we're doing together. And also Marcy teaches courses with the objects and the exhibitions that, that I put on. Right now we're expanding into a publication program. I'm really enjoying working more with living artists recently. And we have no grand overarching plan of exactly what it is that we want to do. We do things year by year. We see how it goes. We see how it's received. We see where the further needs arise, and then we move on. I think you can't know, because if people haven't done this before, you can't really know exactly what it is you're supposed to do if you make an overarching plan and you can't be responsive in that way. This is a project that opened in 2022 that perhaps some of you have seen. This was the first major acquisition of the initiative, was this incredible mask wall by our local hero, Ruth Asawa, that's on permanent view. So you can always come see this work. And I'll just mention briefly some shows that we have opening this fall, because Marcy and I really saw 2022 as our launch year, really trying to lay the groundwork. And based off of that work and its response, we went back, to the drawing board and thought about what we wanted to do next. So this year, the shows at the Cantor are all related to living Asian American artists, because historically, just looking back how hard it was for folks like Bernice Bing, to find platforms for institutional support. What tiny thing can we do to help make a difference in an artist's career? And so this the largest show of them is called Spirit House, and so that opens September 4th. We're gonna start installing in the next couple of weeks, and there's some folks, some artists in this room, Namita Paul, Bin Dan, I think Wanson was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it there in Spirit House. It's an intergenerational, transcontinental grouping of artists of the Asian diaspora whose work challenges the boundary between life and death. And so I'm excited to mount this show. It's the first project that has an exhibition catalog related to the AAAI. And so that will open in September 4th. We have a small solo show of Stanford MFA Livia and Yin. They graduated in 2019, excuse me. And their work really is about Asian American communities across generations, especially as it relates to the history of Chinese immigration. And this is their first solo museum show, so thinking about how to provide platforms for emerging artists. And then we have two things that are up right now, one of which was organized by my amazing colleague, Maggie Detloff, who's our curator, or photo curator, and TT, who I know that we're all fans of here. So TT has a wonderful solo show up right now. And then we have an archive room. This is a new pilot project where we try to show the archival materials that Stanford has acquired. So in 2020, we acquired Bernice Bing's archive, and finally we get to put some of that on display. So AAAI curatorial assistant Kat Kwa organized this beautiful archive room of Bernice's work. So safe to say in the next few weeks, things are gonna get exciting, and I hope you will all join us there. But anyway, I look forward to chatting more about this and everything else, so thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm just gonna talk briefly about it's my band photo. So the work I do. Thank you. So I'm Michele Carlson. I'm a transdisciplinary artist. I work kind of across the fields of visual arts, writing, also occasionally curate, edit, facilitate all sorts of projects, publications, conversations, identify occasionally as a recovering art writer, never know what happens. I think most useful for today is to discuss the work I do with my arts collective, Related Tactics, which was co-founded by myself, Nathan Watson, and Weston Turia, who's somewhere in this room. We founded Related Tactics in 2015, but met in grad school in 2004 in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when we formed Related Tactics, it was really in kind of response to the cultural and political moment as we kind of headed into the 2016 election year, and things feel kind of similar, different, more intense, but kind of same vibes. Things felt so intense at that moment, I think that we understood that we couldn't do the work of racial justice alone anymore, and that we decided to form a collective so that we could operationalize a kind of mutual aid and these systems of support that we'd offered to each other professionally and personally for most of our careers, but just kind of casually. And so our projects explore the connections between art movements for social justice and the public. And we brace a kind of anti-monumentality, a decentralization, and temporary interventions. And we use all sorts of creative tools, mobile objects, and prompts as kind of mechanisms for dissemination and collaboration. And Related Tactics works fully on consensus, so we make all of our projects together as one unit in a real kind of Voltron way, in the sense of is the paperclip pink or should it be pinker? And then we spend a lot of time talking about that. Most of our projects sit at the kind of intersection of race, culture, the public imaginary, and cross-solidarity movement building. And so as a collective, we come together to proactively and specifically address the impacts of systemic racism. And we often do this by creating spaces for mutual support and artistic transformation and kind of hold that position that the impact of systemic racism and institutional violence is one that actually occurs collectively. It's not just one person wielding power. And so because of that, power is a collective project and it should be confronted together. So at the heart of this work is the value we place on working in collaboration and cooperation. And we think about this approach as a strategic position that's kind of in the face of that neoliberal ethos of radical individualism that's really stamped into our education, our institutions, art worlds, and lives. And so, this is when I was one of the times I knocked on the door and Montalvo let me in. And I use the space well. So I apply a wide range of creative strategies as an artist, from image and object making, hosting convenings, facilitating discourse, particularly with related tactics. But I also spend a lot of time and a lot of my career in the college classroom, teaching art practice along with writing, history, and theory, most lately at the Corcoran School of Art and Design at George Washington University. I've also, in kind of past lives, I was the executive director of Art Practical, the now sunsetted Art Practical, which was an arts media organization last hosted by California College of the Arts. RIP. Vivian Sming, also editor-in-chief, amazing editor-in-chief of Art Practical, in the room. So I've held a handful of other administrative roles kind of within and without the institution across a range of motivations that are all kind of fundamentally anchored in the hope that we can all work a little better together, and kind of must if we hope to succeed in breaking down these power systems that are made stronger if we're more separate. And I think it's helpful to situate the work that I do as an artist and with related tactics by borrowing artist and activist Rashid Areen's words, which is that we deploy art as a method, and that is, I think about it as my responsibility to produce counter-knowledge within the institution. And my work with related tactics has really taught me that collectivity is key to breaking down the systems that continue to subjugate us, and that it operates as an urgent kind of liberatory position. Thank you. I thought it would be kind of useful. I was struck by a lot of the things that you all presented, but I thought it would be useful to kind of think about, like, Aleesa, you and Marcy Kwan founded the Triple AI, and Christina, your role as the APA collection specialist of the archives. They're all newly formed in the spectrum of canons and legacies and histories. So both of you are essentially trailblazing within your institutions in the broader field, and I'm wondering if you can kind of start off by just talking a little bit about the conditions by which the AAAI and the APA collection specialist roles kind of came to be, and the experience of being the trailblazers. And institutions love making trailblazers, so.
I think I'm gonna push back a little
Please,
bit and say that I think that one of the sobering things about working at the Smithsonian is realizing how long everything takes. Like, we are part of the government. Bureaucracy is a thing. And I am very much aware of the fact that my position is I'm only here because of the work of many, many others.
Sure.
Right? And so to say that I'm the trailblazer, it's like, well, no, because it took the Asian Pacific American Center to be established, the work of Franklin Odo to happen, right? And then the countless other scholars and curators at the Smithsonian to be recognized, for them to be in leadership positions, and for them to advocate for a need of, a collector at the Archives of American Art. So it takes a long time to do and to get into these positions, and to say that, Asian American artists need to be at the archives. So yeah, I think that actually it's long work, and that was something that the panelists from the previous panel had said too, right? Like, it takes a long time for institutions to recognize this.
The marathon that Jen Wilford mentioned. For sure.
Same. I don't know that I would call myself a trailblazer yet. Like, TBD, let's give it 30 years and see what happens. I could disappear and just run away to an island and no one will remember me. No, so Marcy she came to Stanford in 2016, and she was already teaching her Asian American art history class, and it was clear that, there's this campus resource that's really not being used, that could be leveraged in some way to really support this gap, this like need. Neither Marcy nor I had any training or took courses, or like we had no education in Asian American art and history. So like we both taught ourselves. This was not the area of study that I did in graduate school, but I was very excited to come here and do that work in a kind of homecoming. I mean, I don't think of myself as very old, but now these sort of generational differences are beginning to emerge more and more that I find very fascinating. But when I was in graduate school, I didn't want to be the Asian American person working on Asian American art, because I felt like the ways that my professors would look at me, it would just be like, well, of course, you're going to do something that like aligns with your identity, and then that's somehow diminishing like the scholarly integrity of your work. Where now, of course, I see it as completely the opposite, but that was just not the vibe when I was in school, right? So I came here and I wanted to do this work. Jeff Chang was on my search committee. It was terrifying. I mean, he was one of the nicer ones. But it was very intimidating to come to a place like Stanford, and I knew who Marcy was already, and I was already just like so in awe of what she wanted to do. So to be able to come and try to think about what we could do together was exciting. I mean, one misconception is that people think like, oh, you must have started this because there must be some like massive pot of money that like some donor came up with that like, this is why you're doing it. And no, please, everyone know this, like commit this to your head, because it is not true. Like this came from us, from like a real deep personal and intellectual need of wanting to do this work, not knowing what it constitutes, like what it would constitute, or like what constitutes it, or how we were going to do it. So it's still like always a making it up as we go process, and figuring out how to do it in a way with integrity, with sustainability, with care. And it's challenging because you have, to a certain extent, some role models. So I step into this role, indebted to people like Gordon Chang and Mark Johnson, who are my colleagues and neighbors now, quite literally. So I'm so grateful to like live in a place where this work has like a major foundation, but it is long work. And I think that that's like based off of our prior conversation, one of the main takeaways is that it is very long work. And I'm an impatient person, like by nature, but I've had to like, deal with that, figure out how to deal with that, because unless you really like keep at it for a long time, it's hard to know the impact that what you can do, how you can slowly move the needle within an institution. And like, are you gonna feel satisfied with the amount that you're able to move? How much of a burden or a weight do you personally feel being the person who has to like do this work, and acknowledging that there's so much that comes with it, especially when the work that you do is something that's so personally meaningful to you. There's like this extra dimension to it all. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I feel you with each other.
I mean, I think I'm really struck too by, especially Aleesa, the way you kind of talk about that so much of this initiative is you all just deciding to do it and taking on that responsibility, and that it's not technically written into your job mandate, and the weight of that on a person. And I think, Christine, there's probably versions of that within your own role. And I know within my own institutional experiences, it's like if you aren't the one pitching those specific classes or supporting students in a very particular way, it won't happen. And I'm wondering if you all can kind of talk a little bit about that experience within your own zones.
Yeah, absolutely. So for background information at the Archives of American Art, the folks who collect the material for it to be stored at the archives are collectors, and I'm one of them. There's a total of 4 of us. So there's a national collector who's in charge of the entire nation. We have I know, right? It's like, what does that even mean? And then we have a New York collector, a West Coast collector, and me. And so the burden of that is, I'm in charge of all Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders across the nation, and it's only, there's only so much one person can do in that. And then there's also the added burden of, well, then I'm a gatekeeper as well. right? Because I'm making choices and decisions about who gets to be put in the Smithsonian. And I'm fully aware of what that can do for an artist's career and their legacy. So that's something that I grapple with a lot. As someone who just finished her PhD and felt like I was outside of that gate so often, to now be the gatekeeper is a heavy burden. But I think it's also that tension is really important for me to hold, right? That I shouldn't be comfortable with that, because then I've in some way have relinquished control to the institution, right? So yeah, it's something that I think about a lot.
Yeah, it is funny to realize that you become this thing that you always critiqued, which is in some way being a gatekeeper, right? And it's not something that we like relish in. It's just like by necessity of the job. Like we can only do so many things. Like there are artists and people in this room who I'd love to work with, but I am one person and I can only have so many projects and things going on at any given time. So like that's the hard thing to deal with, is like the distribution of your own time and energy, and reconciling with like the incompleteness of that and the inevitability of not being able to do everything. I will say that the nice thing about the Cantor and at Stanford, and the thing that I hold as most valuable is like as a museum, as an institution, the thing that we value most is ideas and the intellectual, cultural, social, like merit of whatever project it is that you want to do. We are always free, as the banner says, outside of our museum. And so that just means that the projects that we get to do are not dictated by things like how many people do you think this will bring in a day in terms of like ticket sales. Like this is really, we're doing things there because we really believe in the work that we're doing. We believe in the artists that we support. And so that, on the one hand, it's hard to like deal with that balance of feeling like we can't do it all. But then on the other hand, at least I know that the decisions I make are coming from a place that I can feel really good about, like in my own personal integrity, even if it is incomplete. At least we have that. And that's partially why I always wanted to be at an academic art museum, because I think that we have that mandate more than a place like SF MoMA or the Fine Arts Museums, which it takes all kinds of institutions to make up a cultural landscape. But for me, that's like what I find to be most rewarding.
And I'll say too that Michelle, when you're talking about the power of collectivity, I think that's so important to uplift too, because even though I am one person collecting papers for the archives, my main purpose is to not, to raise the quota. My purpose is to serve the community and to serve and to make available these papers for artists, researchers, et cetera. So I think it's important that, I'm not just thinking about my own institution, but working collaboratively with folks like Aleesa, and to make sure that those papers do go somewhere, even though it's not, at the Smithsonian.
But it is our choice also, you know what I'm saying? It's because we want to work together. You can be in this position and also not do that. Like, it is not something that is written necessarily into the job description. Like, I value your presence, I value Melissa Ho's presence at, the Smithsonian, because she also wants to work collaboratively and talk, together as a community. But that's not always been the case, and I think in that small way, some of us are trying to change what it looks like to do cultural or institutional work, which is at least being transparent with each other and like speaking with each other and sharing.
Well, and I think that's the complexity of being gatekeeper and gatekept and all the things all at one time, especially being within an institution. Both of you have kind of talked about that, where actually you are within a legacy of folks who are working in this way, but kind of hold the roles on your own or with a small team. And I was also really struck by how we were talking about this term like special projects or initiative, or I know if I were ever to want to teach like an Asian American art history class, it would be a special topics class that would get scheduled like two academic years from now, which does very little for the students who are requesting that kind of conversation in the moment. And so thinking about, like, again, if you decide not to include something or operate in a certain way, it won't exist. And wondering about like how we both work within these institutions, but also hold them accountable and take them to task to not just take these things seriously temporarily or in a way that could be overturned in a moment, but like bake that stuff into the system. And I'm wondering how you all kind of approach that task, or if you do. I mean, I think your presence inherently does, but.
I think I'm really still figuring that part of it out, because it takes so long to figure out how to like rewrite an institutional's like code of conduct. I mean, I love the earlier panel and thinking about inheritance and creative inheritance, but like the thing that I've inherited is like Leland Stanford's, you know what I mean? Like, and Jane Stanford's institution, and like I've inherited this like predominantly, you know, historically white institution and its models that are still old and like are not even of the 20th century or in the 19th century, you know, for goodness sake. So just, you know, trying to work slowly and consciously to like rewrite the small, unsexy stuff in the ways that we do it internally that maybe like aren't visible to the average audience member, but like it goes so much more, it's like much more about, it has to go beyond representation, as we've been talking about, you know, they were talking about this morning. It's not just about the stuff that we put in the galleries or the labels that we write, it's about how we choose to do things in the museum, and you know, how we choose to work with artists, and how we choose to make decisions, and where's the money go? Like a budget is a moral document, right? Like where does the money go and how is that allocated? So it's those behind the scenes things that are actually like much more challenging than me figuring out what work to put on a wall in a gallery. That's the fun, amazing, wonderful part of being able to provide a platform and a space for an artist and to write about their amazing work. Like that's the great part. It's all that other stuff that it's like, I don't know. I still gotta try to figure that out. You know?
I think a big part of it too is the unpaid labor of teaching your colleagues too, and making them realize like, oh, like these are the Asian American artists that we need to be aware of. And I shall say I'm really grateful that my colleagues at the archives are incredibly open and want to learn, but they have just been taught in a system that excludes them, right? They're all professionally trained art historians who like were raised in university programs, and so it's that like long labor of like doing the work that have for decades been gone unnoticed.
I wonder if we can talk to you a little bit about this term Asian American art. And you know, I think in and of itself that term is an institutional framework, and that is complex. It's both productive and also I think challenging, and I'm wondering, like, how do we sustain and confront the kind of challenges of building legacy within the kind of linearity of the institution, the linearity of the slowness of the institution, for what is actually a really vast and ever-changing demographic and community, and you know, like what is Asian American art feels like, or Asian American art in and of itself feels like it should be a nebulous kind of thing, and then, you know, archives and canons tend to fix and anchor identity and positionality, and I'm just wondering if, like, how you all approach that.
Well, I'm all about keeping that nebulousness. Marcy and I are not particularly interested in pinning, you know, anything down, and we do our best in terms of the shows and the works that, you know, I acquire for the museum to try to show this like expansiveness and contradiction and being able to hold things that, you know, are in conflict or contrast with each other together in a space where we can all talk about it. And I do not see us as like the institution to like make a claim or say exactly like what constitutes Asian Americanness or Asian American art. Like I think Marcy and I are both kind of a little tired of that question, because it, like, you know, this kind of term warfare comes up all the time, where I'm like, I just am more focused on thinking about artists and histories and stories, and that kind of like the particularities or the nitpickiness. I want to keep the capaciousness. I want to keep the openness, because I think that's actually where the radicality lies in terms of what you're thinking of when it comes to Asian Americans. So that's my short answer.
I think I totally agree. And one of the things that we come up against is how can our processes and our services open up the possibility for these different types of art making practices that fall under this like broad umbrella as Asian Americans. So one of the things that I think about is, you know, starting in the 1950s, a lot of artists in general were working with computer arts or working with AV equipment. So then how can the archives have processes, the storage capacity, the knowledge set to acquire that material, which is, you know, a really specified skill set. So how can we work proactively to serve those artists rather than reactively, so that we can showcase those different types of artists and art making practices?
I think maybe we just have time for one more question, or between us. Yeah. We'll go fast. I think the kind of fundamental question, one of the kind of fundamental questions too is like, why the institution? You know, like, I think especially kind of being in the Bay Area where there's this rich history of kind of anti-establishmentness or working DIY-ness or working, you know, within and without the institution. I'm kind of curious, you know, what it means to kind of, and I think about this a lot for myself, like why have I anchored myself to the institution when I think there's many ways in which we can build history and build community and build narratives and rethink all of these systems. And I'm just curious how you all have thought about this kind of it being a part and an agent of the institution, given all the things that we've talked about.
Because someone has to.
Yeah.
So I'm biased because I'm an archives person, but art history can only come if there are archives, right? Primary source material is super important to building an art history. And if Asian Americans are not included in those archives, then how can we continue to expand that art history? It's also about like serving our elders. I primarily talk to established artists, and a lot of them don't know that there's a repository available for their legacies to continue on and for people to research. So for me, it's like, well, it's imperative that I have this position so that I'm serving this community.
I mean, same if it's not us doing it, then somebody else is going to be in these roles, right? And, you know, I think the world is changing in amazing ways, and maybe they would all be people who are aligned with our sort of similar beliefs and values, but also maybe not historically, because let's look at what museums have been and what they have done. So, you know, it's a hard thing to grapple with being an institutional person, because you're like, I myself am an individual and I have my own, you know, thoughts and beliefs that sometimes my work at an institutional level aligns with and to the best of my ability, and sometimes it does not. But, you know, and also not to get like too woo-woo about museums or whatever, because we are in a time where their presence and their role is being called into question in the cultural landscape, which I am very much all for. At the same time, I think many of us have had really transformative experiences inside of museums. You know, they have been places, I'm talking about the positive experiences here, you know, they've been places of rest, of respite, of wonder, of engagement with objects that we would otherwise not have access to. It is about preservation at a certain level, because if I am not choosing to like collect these works, like where will they go? And I can't take everything. So there is actually still heartbreak in the work that I do, because I cannot literally take everything for our collections. But being able to provide a space where Asian American art doesn't have to make an argument for itself, that it lives and exists and is presented in a way with thought and care for others to encounter, so that, you know, I think this is already the case with younger generations, that of course, why wouldn't we be able to see this kind of material in museums? Like, absolutely. Like, they could not imagine that it would be the case that it would not be there. But we have lived in a world where it has not been there, and so just being able to do that, just the simple act of being able to provide meaningful experiences with works of art, I still think is a worthy enterprise, and clearly these institutions are not going away, so someone's got to do it, right?
Thank you all so much for spending the afternoon with us and allowing us to talk about institutions and bureaucracy on a Sunday. Thank you all so much.